Thank you, Stephanie, and thanks to the Art Basel Hong Kong team, and of course to our wonderful speakers who I'm really excited to speak to today, Cem, Hilde, and Gabrielle. Thank you to the three of you for joining. This is a conversation that I anticipate will generate a lot of different directions and questions, but ultimately we're talking about memes and the practice of memes as critical practice. So we're in a bit of an open territory when it comes to this. There's actually so many things to talk about. And one of the things that we can get into, which we won't actually, is kind of theorizing it, analyzing memes, trying to understand it from that perspective. Instead, because the three of you are here, let's begin with your practices, what you actually do as a starting point. But I want to start with a question for the three of you, and just let's briefly go through one by one. But if the art world meme maker is a kind of comedic villain, what are your origin stories, your backstories? And is there like a particular meme or a moment that illustrates this backstory or origin story? Cem, let's start with you, and then we'll go through alphabetically.
Yeah, hello again, and yeah, very happy to be here and on this panel as well. Yeah, I don't know. I think in that way, I didn't have like a particular moment that's like a particular meme that like defined this. I think it was, for me, it was also about doing this. I feel cautious to say practice, but as a practice to like do this every day consistently and creating something out of that. But when I look back now, I definitely realized that this coincided with my own disappointment or my own exclusion from the art world. And it kind of came after I finished my studies and looking for a full-time job and the difficulties I had in that due to my visa status. That really motivated this. And obviously, I think the pandemic kind of gave it a different context, and everyone was stuck to their phones, and we were basically on the same playing field with institutions, artists, and all of these exclusionary like institutions or situations. So for me, it was a continuous thing.
Thank you, Cem. And Hilde, what about yourself?
Well, I got interested in memes probably in 2015 or so. A good friend of mine, we used to send them back and forth, but memes were sort of a different thing back then. They were primarily made by 13-year-old boys. And, I probably have the sense of humor of a 13-year-old boy disguised by the veneer of the art world. And it was me trading these memes back and forth that I loved, and realizing, oh, I could just change a few words and these would completely relate to the art world. So it was, I think it was this meme, one of my, the first meme I ever made was this picture of a drag queen, or it was two images of a drag queen, and it was a drag queen when I think she had probably, or they had just started like their dressing up, and like their wig is crooked, their makeup is horrible, whatever. And it said like, me when I started my, and I think it said blog, because this is like a long time ago. And it was like humble, sweet, kind, blah, blah, blah. And she looked like very kind. But then the second image was like her, and she looked like Lady Gaga, like perfect sunglasses, perfect wig, perfect makeup, perfect contouring. And it said like vain, self-involved, this, that. And then I just changed it to like me when I started my gallery. And it was like sweet, humble, earnest, and then it was like me me like now with my gallery. And it was just like, oh, this is easy. I can just like make all these memes and just change a few words and just make them about the art world. And it's sort of just been like, it's evolved obviously out of that. So I owe my entire career to 13-year-old boys.
Amazing. And Gabrielle.
Yeah, I agree. Boys need more recognition. No, I think we started the White Pube in 2015, so similar times. Starting to feel really tired of the way that art was written about in like sort of convoluted, boring, overly academic ways, historical reverence that I just couldn't care less about at the time, and thinking, okay, well, maybe there is a better way to go about this. So Zarina, who's not here today, and I started a website, thewhitepube.com, and sort of just got on with writing and figuring out what our voice should be that didn't look like the other pre-existing art writing at the time. And it was kind of exciting because, especially in London, it felt very needed in a way we didn't quite understand the relevance of. Like, you know, the older art world was saying to us like, oh my God, this is what the art world needs. You're going to go the whole way. Oh, like it's such a breath of fresh air and all the rest of it. So there was quite a lot of energy at the time to read weird art essays and weird reviews and things that were a bit spiky. And I think as the years went on, our audience probably also got tired of being expected to read essays that were sort of growing in length, because accidentally, even though we started thinking we're not going to become those people, we're not going to become those like really boring writers, our essays accidentally got long and boring. I think. And sometimes it was just easier to like wrap it up in the parcel of a meme instead of expecting people to read 6,000 words or listen to like a 60-minute podcast episode about institutional critique. And like it sort of became a little bit addictive to just deliver that same critique in one image with one sentence, like the fast food equivalent of essay writing. And there we go. That's sort of where we came into it. Like given what we thought a tired audience needed to like pep them up a bit.
And I think the three of you have, in those brief little origin stories, have a lot that we can pick up on in other discussions later on today. But before we get into the kind of the practice itself, since beginning, the three of you have evolved in different ways, beginning with these kind of like online platforms, anonymous or not, but now are kind of working, for example, with in different trajectories with institutions. It's kind of grown in a way. Maybe a brief, very briefly, because we'll touch on it, I think, a little bit later, but how have your practices evolved since beginning, White Pube, Jerry Gagosian, and Freeze Magazine? Let's start with, again, alphabetical order. Cem.
Successful to be the first one answering, but that's okay. I think, yeah, I mean, I can really observe in a funny way, I think we all have the same niche, but then within that niche, there are like 3 different directions that we all took. And I think this depends on a lot of factors. For me, there's like, one is to have some sort of like, there are some ground rules that I have in what I want to, like when I just try to decide on or if I want to participate in a project. And can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, it's cutting off on my side. And for me, it comes from like, first of all, deciding whether doing a physical project or like some sort of a project as an extension of memes would contribute to meme culture or studies and like a wider recognition of it. In that way, I don't believe that, maybe I'm dropping conversation bombs right now, but like memes don't need to be recognized in an institutional setting. They don't have to be, but I think there are situations where that could become beneficial for a wider recognition of memes. So that's what I try to do, like when responding to invitations and projects that I received. So this started with doing first of all online projects. Like I did a dating project with two friends. We matched people on Valentine's Day according to their meme taste, and this attracted like a couple hundred people from like all different countries. Or we commissioned people to write on memes in the same way. Or then I started doing exhibitions, mainly as installations. I did one in Berlin at Weserhalle gallery, which kind of built a meme in a physical space to kind of deconstruct it. And then I was a part of documenta, both as a curatorial assistant and as an artist, harvesting, which means doing artistic recordings of meetings and the whole process of the exhibition. And I did that through memes. I did an exhibition on exhibition texts in the same way. Again, that was kind of like, that actually was an idea I had for a meme that became an exhibition afterwards, which was about writing exhibition texts that are so generic that could apply to any exhibition. And most recently, I did an intervention at Louisiana Museum in Denmark, where I replaced existing exhibition posters in the space with fictional ones that situate memes into that and kind of make statements that the museum would never make, like saying some artworks look the same, and so on. And yeah, and now I think also like listening to the others, what I realized, like I think these all come from like exclusionary situations that now I think are turning into positions of power, and I do recognize that, and I think it's more about kind of recognizing it and seeing what constructive change could be done also with that, because I think that's also a bit unavoidable at this point, and like the only way to move forward is to recognize that.
Thank you, Cem. And there's it's interesting how this kind of this sort of like kind of I'm trying so hard, especially Hilde, after listening to your podcast yesterday about curatorial language. I'm really trying hard not to use any of those terms, but there's a lot to kind of discuss, and I think especially like that sort of that thing that like that's a critical impulse, I had to do it, of making a meme about something kind of extends into other practices like exhibitions. And Hilde, for example, you've also expanded into sort of curatorial practice and podcasts, and you know, how has your practice evolved since the origin of Jerry Gagosian?
Well, I already had a curatorial practice because I was an artist who was forced to work in the art world because I had to have a job, and not just a job, many jobs, in order to have the privilege of living in the most expensive cities in the world, just for the chance to maybe have an art career. So I've had a curatorial practice since 2012. But and then I ended up having a gallery in Los Angeles, and I curated every single show that we did for 2.5 years while we were open. But I started Jerry Gagosian anonymously. I was doxxed by Kenny Schachter, unwillingly. So that was a blessing in disguise. At first, I was very angry and did not want to be revealed, because I loved the perception that I was a male genius. I loved when people used to write about me and, you know, say all these fabulous things about this brilliant man who was speaking all these truths about the art world, because then when it was revealed that I was a woman, suddenly I was just this, you know, petty woman who was just jealous that she wasn't invited to the party, you know, and I, you know, suddenly the language drastically changed about like who Jerry Gagosian was. And then I had to sort of work my way out of that. But that's a whole other story. Your question is, how what has changed? What have I gotten into? Much like all of us here, except I'm, an American capitalist. I started a private newsletter. I write about the art market from a financial perspective, which people pay for. I go to all the art fairs. I write about trends. I write about what people are buying, what people are selling, what I see is coming, what I see is going. And then I sort of, because I study the economy on the side, I also sort of write about, like, I see the art world as a mise-en-scene, and then I write about, like, what are the underpinnings, what are the geopolitics that are going to make the art world look and feel a certain way, and why do I see it coming and going a certain direction. So that's the private newsletter. Then we have the weekly podcast where we have art world conversations, and those span, the gamut, everything from I hate art speak, which is the one you listen to having, all kinds of guests. And, we had Blake Gopnik, who's a New York Times art critic. We just had Stefan Simkowitz on the podcast this last week. We've had, all kinds of guests. Sometimes it's just myself and Matthew Capasso talking. And then, of course, there's the merchandise component, which is actually a huge revenue stream, and something that I never expected to be like a part of Jerry Gagosian, but has turned into a big thing. And something that I love doing because I love designing these products, and I think of them as art. I think of it as very affordable art that people can go and buy. And then on top of that, there are these curatorial projects. Like I did something with Sotheby's just this last year. I curate something at least once a year for spring break. I mean, the list goes on and on. I'm getting ready to go to NYU Stern for business school. So like I'm, evolving, and I consider going to business school as part of my art practice. How can I be a better artist, and how can I turn this into something truly global and effective? I need to be a better business person. So what am I doing? I'm furthering my education. So I know time is of the essence. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's interesting how it sort of started. There was a practice, there was an attempt, and then it sort of became, Jerry Gagosian was a sort of a new beginning in a way, and then it sort of expanded into a whole other slew of things. And Gabrielle, for you and with White Pube, it started not necessarily with memes, but as a kind of platform for critical writing. But now it's expanded into a much bigger thing as well.
Yeah, we started with like a major focus just on exhibition reviews and describing how weird it is to even go to an exhibition. Like, why is that a thing a human would spend their time doing, let alone why would a human even make the art? Like, why do we go to these little spaces and just go like, ooh? It's kind of fascinating. Over the years, it zoomed out, went more institutional, like who's deciding what goes in those little rooms, who's paying for it, who gets to pick and who doesn't get picked, and all the rest of it. And I think in that zooming out, in that looking at like the problems that mean the art world isn't accessible, and I mean that in like a broad sense, not everyone gets to be an artist, and like, should they or shouldn't they? Like, what do all these questions mean? We changed the website a little bit. So we added things like, we decided to publish our accounts. So we started the website in 2015, and I think from 2017 onwards, all of our income and expenditure has been on the website, and it continues to be there if anyone is interested in knowing how much we're getting paid for this talk. We then added something called the Successful Funding Application Library, so that anyone who's applying to like Arts Council England, Creative Scotland, more broad things for residencies and travel, and a lot of the emergency funding that came in for artists during COVID in this country. that is written in like the institutional speak that Hilde is referencing. Like you have to learn this language in order to like manipulate it, and no one teaches that class at art school in the as far as I know. No one sits down and talks you through it. So we decided to try and like gather as many successful funded applications as possible so people could just download them as PDFs and figure it out for themselves. And then maybe one other thing to add is like we also started a creative grant. So we give £500 every month to a working class early career artist, no strings attached. And yeah, maybe like the writing has also changed direction. We review games, books, theatre, film, just whatever. The best way I've described it is like whatever is getting on my nerves, I write about. And I mean that for like better or worse. Like maybe it has gotten on my nerves because I'm like, oh my God, this is, everyone should know about this. Or maybe it is just typically like fucking annoying. Yeah, anyway.
Wait,
Oh.
can I ask a question?
Of course.
Sure.
What's getting on your nerves right now?
Oh my God. If you don't know if you've read the last review on the White Pube, but you should check it out. It's a review of Mauro C. Martinez's exhibition at Unit London, which is sort of relevant to this conversation as well. I'll leave it there. It's on the website.
Okay, I'll check it out later.
Definitely worth a read. And no, thank you, Gabrielle. There's so the three of you come from different directions. You know, Cem, Hilde, you both have an artistic sort of practice. Gabrielle more on the writing side, but you come into contact with let's say, for example, social media, with the way that the online world works. And one of the things that I'm curious about is these platforms almost have their own kind of like rules, their own way of communicating. Like if you want to post, for example, one kind of content versus, for example, like a meme, things resonate differently. It's almost like you have to adapt to it in a particular way. I'm curious about how this sort of works, how your own kind of practice has led to, your own kind of approach has led to dealing with the online world, whether it's something like Instagram. Yeah, it's sort of an open question, but this sort of thing where you have your own direction, your own practice, you touch on something like Instagram or these online platforms, and you have to sort of adapt to that. Let's do reverse alphabetical, actually. Let's start with Gabrielle.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you picked me. I think that I hate Instagram, full stop. Like artists are like totally bound to it in a way that the cat is off on one. In a way I just don't think they should have to be. Like an artist should spend their time and energy focusing on making art and bringing in new ideas in order to help move that art along and advance their own thoughts and aesthetics. And like I think the same when it comes to writing. I should spend my time writing, but what is happening is that everyone needs to be their own like marketing assistant, and everyone needs to then make content in order to like package the thing that they've spent so much time making and the thing that like the craft that they are more interested in order to let people know that the art or the writing even exists. And like it just feels unfair. I think some people it works completely well for, like Cem talking about meme studies. Like for some people they are interested in the platforms themselves, but like the majority aren't. Most people just want to get off it completely. And for me, like that's how it's always felt. So the website, thewhitepube.com, is what I care about, and I just use social media as a way to like redirect people over there or signpost them or something. And yeah, it's, I think the thing that has always sort of upset me is like what does most well on our platforms are the memes instead of the more slow, nuanced stuff that might take like longer to think about. And then I also sympathize because people are so burnt out that they just don't want to or can't engage with stuff that's like stickier. So I've got like a love-hate relationship with it, where I think like memes are very efficient and they're great for institutional critique, but I don't think they're as good for visual arts. Yeah.
And what about you, Hilde? You know, starting with something like Instagram or these online platforms, and your own practice. How does that work? Dealing with these pre-existing things that have their own rules and their own ways of working.
Well, I absolutely love writing about the senior director. I love writing about Zoe and Chloe. I love writing about the registrars who were left behind in the back of the gallery. I love writing about the beautiful universe that is the art world. I love writing about people lining up in procession for 11 a.m. Art Basel, with their on-running sneakers, ready to push past anybody that they need to in order to get straight to the booth that they need to get primary access to the work that they want to get. I think the art world is so utterly fascinating. It is, it is a soap opera, it is a drama, it's everything. The characters, the people, how it all plays out, the villains, the good, the bad. And you know what? Everybody is on social media. So where else can I tell these, fabulous stories of torture and disdain and mockery and the hilarity? And where else can I do it but social media? So, as somebody who worships at the temple of Hauser and Wirth and, spends their time, in Super Blue, in a James Turrell having a spiritual experience, where else can I go and write about it other than Instagram?
There you go. And there's so much to talk about, but but there is something about that. I think if you put yourself almost like in that mindset of being like an observer, not something who's having things subjected to them, but being like, I'm observing all of these incredible things happening around me. Suddenly, the record button turns on, and the story. It's less about these kind of horrific experiences, but more about stories that are kind of everywhere around you. But Cem, also, if I'm curious about your own kind of engagement with, for example, like the platform of social media and the platforms on social media, like, for example, adapting to things like Instagram or beginning from it. What's your take?
I definitely also have a, let's say, a love and hate relationship with Instagram in particular, or like any form of social media. I think has its own politics and its own like censoring algorithms and everything, and like suppressing people and so on, and you kind of have to make compromises in that. But what I prefer to focus on in this is to kind of look at memes. Like for me, memes are still the center of my quote-unquote practice, because I also use it almost like a diary of my own experiences, conversations I have, things I read, and like news I look at. So in that way, it is important to like continue doing it on a regular basis. But beyond that, I focus on, for instance, giving workshops on memes and meme making, both on my own and also with my collective, Her NY. And because I see that, I think there is also value in like basically like teaching people more about tech literacy and like how they can engage with their phones in a more critical way. And one term I made up in this is called meme thinking, which is basically about kind of, because in, I think, contemporary art, popularity is almost has an adverse effect on what you do. Like if you become a popular artist, that already undermines your criticality in the view of at least some people. And I'd like to think that meme thinking kind of is the intersection of criticality and popularity in a way, but also not just popularity on its own either. And I think this could definitely introduce like a more informed conversation about if we can bring any change to these institutions, or what could be improved, and what benefit could be created out of this in a more like collective manner.
That's that kind of tendency towards, you know, seeing how you can critique and not just sort of leaving it at that and pushing towards that is actually leads really well into something else that I wanted to ask the three of you, which is, and Hilde, you know, I think all of you in your own work have touched on this as well, is that there are things that are often, especially working in the arts, that are kind of in private conversations. People sort of like have these hushed, you know, things of like, can you believe this is happening? Or why am I doing this? But I think, and this is something that I've experienced with the three of your work, and I think many other people that I've worked with also have this as well, where it's like finally seeing it on social media, kind of in this very relatable format, makes it like, wow, this is real. I'm heard, you know. And but I'm wondering, and Cem, this actually speaks directly on your point, is how much of this is kind of like critique that has the potential for change, and how much of it is more to do with being in on the joke or being in on the situation, or a kind of catharsis, like just like, oh, I've been recognized and I feel a bit better for that. Gabrielle, what do you think?
Well, so hearing Cem speak then made me feel like a bit of a phony, because like I don't feel as artistically fulfilled when I make these pieces, these images. Like I sort of feel like you have just been describing, like I am happy to offer something so that everyone can, in that like Twitter as a town square way, be like, oh yeah, clapping, we all agree, we all feel the same way. This is like a weird moment that has captured our distrust of artistic institutions or whatever it is. I think there have been a few times over our years writing and making memes where we have like boiled down kind of incredibly serious institutions, especially incidents that maybe have like undermined places like Tate Modern, Tate Britain, in order to call them out and place them as the villains that Hilde is describing. Like I remember there was one picture, I was hoping you weren't going to pick me first because I was going to try and find the image, but there was like a picture I remember of a group of rats together, and I think I labeled it like Tate Modern's meeting the day after the White Pube puts a review up of them or something. Like you know, these are spaces that totally do the performance of like, we're going to be very inclusive, we're going to be we're going to do the work, we're going to listen, we're going to be accountable, we're going to blah blah blah. And they love putting mission statements out, and all the mission statements sound exactly the same from every single one of them, and nothing ever happens. But like, they've said all the right things, so they can leave it at that because they've done the right PR. I think like in that sense, putting a meme up of a group of rats talking and taking, you know, and joking that that's like a meeting at Tate is almost as useless as the meeting that they're pretending to have. Like there's just something about like the futility of it all that I like to match sometimes, and maybe that's what I would speak to in like the terms of the private public moment. It's, I don't trust it, and sometimes it's nice to be as like silly, like the way the White Pube is called the White Pube in order to mock the white cube idea that art is best shown in perfect white spaces, or like the White Cube gallery chain. I once upon a time stood outside Hong Kong's White Cube and took a picture, and like always cover the C over the sign whenever I'm at one of these spaces. Like, you know, it's unprofessional, but I don't think even that unprofessionalism is doing anything, because they're so powerful and they're not interested in change. So like, what's a silly little meme gonna do? Sometimes I just think my energy should be better spent like going and knocking on the door or speaking to councils or speaking to funders, and like I just feel like I'm not doing enough.
Yeah, that's I think that's a good question you asked, and certainly there's that sort of underlying thing of like what happens when the private experience or these sort of shared experiences get a kind of social currency. And Hilde, I think you're also involved in a very different, let's say, neighborhood of the art world, and your experiences, as you touched on a little bit different, are quite come from a very different place. It's less about these kind of like larger nonprofit institutions that are positioning themselves, or state institutions that are positioning themselves in certain ways, but a very different kind of worlds that that you have a chance to observe and write about and meme about.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry, because can you re-ask the question in perhaps just a slightly more concise way? I'm sorry, I got lost in her answer and then I forgot how to answer the question myself. I'm sorry.
Also, I think I may have been doing the typical curator thing of sort of getting lost in my own words too. But let's say to put it really concisely, how much of the meme making actually is a kind of critique, and how much of it is being sort of in on the joke, or just kind of having that sense of release and pointing out something?
Yeah, I think I'm with her. I don't think that as I have sort of, I don't think that memes are an effective, like useful, like way of being critical or changing like contemporary discourse. Not to undermine anyone here or myself, and all like 3,000 memes that I've ever made. And I'm glad that people get to feel seen, but let's be honest, like everybody's just doom scrolling, and like you're gonna laugh at my joke, you're gonna laugh at a white Pube joke, you're gonna laugh at a Freeze magazine joke, but you're also gonna laugh at like a cat meme, you're gonna like smile at your friend's baby, like you're gonna like, it doesn't matter, like I'm happy that you feel seen, like I'm happy that like you're in on the joke, and maybe you're like learning more about the art world that we all exist in. And if like this ends up being an educational tool, like that's great. But I think ultimately the meme itself became very toothless, probably in the last 2.5 years, 3 years, because everyone and their mom makes memes and has a meme account now. So there's really nothing like that special about it anymore. I really think about it from a writing perspective, and oftentimes I'm reusing characters. Like I'm writing constantly about these characters, and they don't have like a name. I mean, Zoe and Chloe have a name, but like I'm writing about the senior director, I'm writing about these different characters, and I'm making these jokes, and they're cliches that just exist in the art world. And I'm, as I always say at the top of Jerry Gagosian, I'm just at the cutting edge of stating the obvious. Like, I don't think that I'm like over illuminating anything. I'm just kind of like saying what everybody else, maybe I'm crap, like, technically I'm like, white trash from, California. So like, I'm just saying it how it is. Like, I'm not really like, I remember like when I worked at a blue chip gallery, or any gallery for that matter, the way that they would speak, like they wouldn't say like we sold a work, they'd say like we placed the work. Like I'd be like, so you sold it, how much did you sell it for? And it was like, no, we don't speak that way, like it's all about discretion and placement. And like, I'm just really not that way. I'm really about like, let's talk about what it is. So like when I'm making memes, it really is maybe more about like an educational thing. And it's about being really playful about like, let's just say exactly like she said, like, let's just cut to the heart of it. Let's be really fast. Let's make the junk food version. I've never used the junk food thing. I always think of it like graffiti, but you're right. It is like kind of the junk food version. Let's go straight to the heart of it. Let's just talk about what it is. But also it does play out like theater, and it's very fun. Like, it's super amusing. I don't want it to go away. Like, I love watching it.
But can I just say, like, the bit that you said about it becoming toothless over the past 2 years or something, yeah, and I think that's why I'm like so fed up with it, because if you know, rewind to maybe like 2016, it wasn't usual to see art criticism on Instagram, and like people like us have put it there. And at the time, like when we would put a review up of anyone, someone would be like, well, that's cyberbullying. And it's like, just because it's not on like a printed art journal that you paid like 14 quid to buy, you aren't taking it seriously, and it's cyberbullying. And like everyone is used to it now, nothing is shocking. And I really agree. I'm like waiting for the next thing to really like impact us. Yeah.
Actually, I did want to go ahead over to Cem as well, because I think there's an interesting kind of spectrum of things that are happening. On one side, it's kind of like, this is, you know, like this is an important critical tool, and on the other, there's kind of the opposite. But Cem, I'm curious to hear your thoughts in response, because you know, you do come from that kind of more critical perspective, or the critical power of memes.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, I think, like, first of all, I think the last thing that Gabrielle said about, like, I think memes kind of losing their novelty is, I think, almost like a sign of quote unquote like success of it, and like how it kind of became normalized, and like I think has been a positive thing, and like a positive outcome. And I think in that way, again, that's the tool that what memes can be instrumentalized to do, like to normalize ideas, like normalize that art speak is just should be more blunt, more direct, and or saying that some or most art jobs are abusive is, like, I think normalizing these ideas, I think, do have an effect, even though it's intangible. In that way, I always say that I think memes are not revolutionist, but they're reformist, or that's how I like to look at it. And I think in that way, it's also not fair to, I think, single out memes as this isolated thing, because I think in that way you could say exactly the same thing about political art making and what that might lead to. That is also very messy, and in that way, I think it's also possible to connect memes to like political art making, sort of political image making, such as like John Hartfield, for instance. I think is a very inspirational example for this. And like, I think in that way, what we refer to as memes today is actually internet memes, and it's just one iteration of producing this kind of work. And in that way, I kind of both agree and disagree that I think obviously this will take another shape in 6 months' time, in 2 years' time, in 5 years' time. And we're just kind of rolling with it. And this is just one way it came out. And in a way, it also applies to many other industries too. Like fashion is about creating viral images, especially like this year. It's so much also about inserting digital objects in physical spaces, and like this weird imagery that is designed to look good on Instagram and so on. I think in that way, memes are not alone in this field at all. But I still feel a bit more idealistic about what they can aspire to do and what they can evolve into. Obviously, I also do like different projects around it now, and maybe memes will kind of shift into a different direction, but I'm not giving up.
That's interesting, and I think there is something about the like you mentioned, there's a thing in the arts, and I think this is shared with design, with fashion, with gaming, with these kind of really kind of labor intensive industries that present a very like beautiful facade to the public. You know, people are coming in, they're experiencing things, they're buying things, they're engaging with them in one way or another. But what happens behind the scene is a bit like a friend of mine who works in the gaming industry sort of said about his own world is, you know, don't ask how sausages are made, in a way. And that was, and so there is something almost like peeking into those things. We do have a little bit of time left, and there's millions of things that I want to ask you. But just for the audience who are, you know, watching and listening, you can enter the questions into the Q&A box, and you know, as they come up, I'll throw them in. But one question I did want to ask, actually, when it comes to sort of this engagement with social media, I think two things that I would like to discuss. We'll see how much time we have. But one side is, you know, you mentioned 2021, there was a shift, or a couple of years ago, let's say, and there was that shift. That was the first year that I heard about things like shadow banning. And you know, this was a time when there was a lot of political upheaval around the world, and people memes were a very kind of powerful way of like almost like spreading news and awareness. But then things started to shift around that time. And I'm curious about your own personal experiences, if this has affected you in a way. You know, for example, did these things, like, for example, shadow banning, or the other kind of like engaging with the algorithm, and, you know, things did shift around that time. And I think the three of you mentioned this sort of two plus year mark. What are your kind of experiences with that shift in how social media itself works?
I am the queen of being shadow banned, or I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how many times everybody else here has been shadow banned. I've been shadow banned at least 3 times, and it's very punishing because when you're shadow banned, you don't know how long you're going to be shadow banned for. There's not like a time limit. Like, they don't say like, okay, you did this, so you're going to be shadow banned for this long. The first time I was shadow banned for taking a very common like meme format, which is this scene from a movie which is about the last days of Hitler, when he realizes he's losing the war. And that's a meme format that so many people have used. And you just change the subtitle to make it about anything. And I made it about like Hitler was Yvonne Wirth realizing that he was losing Simone Lee, and trying to figure out why right before the Venice Biennale. And like, because I posted that, allegedly I was posting and promoting a hate group. Even though it was like Hitler's last day. And it's like, if you go on YouTube, I mean, there are thousands of versions of this, and it has nothing. It could be about like Black Friday, like I didn't get the big screen TV I want. Like, it's not, nobody uses it as pro Hitler, you know, whatever. So that was shadow ban number 1. Shadow ban number 2 was I made something that just was Kris Kardashian saying, I'm going to kill Kim, like Kim Kardashian, joking. And that was promoting violence. So I was shadow banned again for 4 months. And they take away all your privileges. You cannot be found. You're not allowed to sell your products online. Like, they totally deactivate your account. Basically, people will not, you'll get like no likes on anything you post. It's awful. And then the other one, I was criticizing Hunter Biden for his really bad C- abstraction paintings that he was selling for $550,000 to anonymous people, and nobody was allowed in to go see the show. And so I made this joke, because there was this clip of Angela Merkel walking and talking to Putin, and because of all the cameras clicking, you couldn't hear what they were saying. So I was writing in like subtitles, and I was saying like, oh, it's much easier this time. We don't need to do like to infiltrate American politics. Like we don't need to do the like whole Facebook avenue of like, you know, whatever. All you need to do is go into this gallery and buy these really bad paintings, and you can like curry favor with this American president. And because I posted Putin, I was shadow banned again for 3.5 months. So like, it's really crazy, and they will not tell you why. And I'm on like, I've been put on notice. When I go to Instagram and I go to like my settings, I have a permanent thing that says, if you fuck up, excuse my language, one more time, we're taking your account away. So like everything I post is so watered down. So like my true opinions, you have to read by going and subscribing to my newsletter. Because if I were to like post something like even close to like political or real on Instagram, they'll take my account away.
Which is why we shouldn't be there. Like, it's if these platforms can't like, what's the word, they can't hold satire, then I don't think anyone in the arts should like hang around. Like, we're trying to say things in ways that the actual like platforms themselves cannot read. And if you look now at like what has happened to Twitter, all the news stories this week have been like, they just don't have the capacity to deal with hate speech or, you know, child abuse imagery or whatever it is. Like, they can't filter it anymore. They've lost the capacity. But the thing is, none of them have ever been able to do so. And in their attempt to try and like make it a safe platform for everyone, especially artists, especially sex workers, LGBT content, all of it just gets flagged, taken down, and removed, and accounts banned for like much less. Like, I think it's so bad for art, and the meme format especially just like blurs that line in a way like it automatically cannot tolerate. I can't remember the question also.
Yeah, I kind of want to shift into a little bit because we do have about like 5 or 6 minutes before I want to open things up to the audience. We're getting a couple of interesting questions actually, and maybe I'll throw this over to Cem as well. But I'll add something to the question, which is basically to do with, you know, both of you touched on meme formats, and you know, there's a couple of there's so many that are kind of like common currency, like for example the Wojak meme, or the kind of NPC character, the, you know, the Drake, the you know, like you also mentioned, for example, like there's these kind of like very accepted things, and some of them do come from popular culture and things like this, but some of them also come from, let's say, like seedier sides of the internet, or for example like certain communities that we might not politically like agree with or like, but whose meme formats end up getting used for other purposes. So Cem, I actually wanted to throw this over to you. What, and mind you, we have about 5 minutes, so this is a big question, but what happens when we use meme formats or imagery for things that they're not necessarily intended for? Like, for example, the Wojak meme or certain other things.
I think that's just very, maybe I gave a similar explanation to all of your questions, but I think, again, that's very messy and I think it's just sort of like a battleground. I think in that way, there are definitely things that needs to be avoided, like, like different forms of discrimination, racism, shaming, and so on. And I think in that way, how I dealt with that was to more listen to people's feedback and like not hesitate to remove memes if I made a meme that had an unintended meaning and context that I wasn't aware of. In those situations, I usually just archive them and don't like continue circulating them. But I also feel like the meanings around certain images is first of all unknown, and like their origins are unclear. And I like to describe memes as Limor Schiffman is this like meme scholar who says that memes are actually a form of digital folklore. And I really agree with that. I think that way it's also not possible to, I think, frame any individual character or image without having a clear message, like to say that it comes from a certain discriminatory background. That is, I think, also like a really big argument to make. And in the same way, I think, yeah, they could be used for constructive purposes. And these also change, I think, with humor, like all the time. That if you listen to a stand-up show from the 70s, I'm sure 1/3 of the jokes will be a bit disturbing. And also in that way, humor has to attach itself on different forms of stereotypes and public knowledge or like public anecdotes. In that way, it is also possible to fall into that in the long term. And I think, again, that's just like a constant negotiation that you have to be in.
And so they do very quickly. Yeah. Sorry, Gabrielle, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, I think I agree it's a constant negotiation, but like personally, I wouldn't feel comfortable to speak in language that is like so contaminated by alt-right internet users. Like personally, I don't understand why Freeze Magazine's icon uses a Wojak. Like even if it's, as you say, you want to be there to interrogate what that means, and it's part of digital folklore, and it's about like educating people about the uses of these things. I think it's like too far gone, and it's like it's a flag for people who I think I don't want to be associated with, and I don't want to like make content for either. I have avoided using that type of stuff in the work that we make. I just don't think it's relevant.
That's it's really interesting, because these things do push back and forth a lot, and like I think we've seen things. Hilde, by the way, I don't know if instead of me sort of talking, but I don't know if you had if you wanted to jump in on this this particular thing of the actual kind of, let's say, meme formats or imagery, and sort of the charge behind them, and what it means to use something that might have another meaning.
Yeah, I guess it just depends what corners of the internet you hang out in, and I think that Instagram has me pinned as it knows me at this point. Like I found my both my cats, on Instagram. Like it knows like how I like to dress. It knows like what I think is funny. It knows whatever. It knows a lot about me. I've fed it a lot of information since 2011 when it came into existence. So, you know, I hang out in a very sort of, besides my like 13-year-old boy humor that, you know, maybe could step over that line, but really never did or never had. I mean, the jokes I would laugh at were like the Blink 182 jokes, like, you know what I mean? We're just like pretty like, I never really stepped over into that like alt-right universe. So I use like models, like, because Instagram knows I like models. Like I look at fashion. So I'm like, oh, there's a good senior director. Like, you know, like I'm just not there. So, and I'm more interested, like I said, in the sort of storytelling part. I'm not into meme, like anthropology studying. I'm like more into the like, how can I tell the story of like the art world, and like, I'm like a casting director, right? So I'm like going around like finding imagery and videos that I think like fit the role. So I just never really have gone in that direction. And I think Instagram knows like I don't play in the alt-right whatsoever. Like I'm more interested in like yoga pants. Like, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's a big place, and sometimes these imagery, or you know, these things move, they blur from one part of the internet to the other, and some things are very kind of kind of isolated. But I did want to open up to a couple of questions that we have. We have some really good ones. So from Jacobo Garcia, they ask, meme studies, haha. What are your views on it? I.e. pushing academia into something that started as a joke? That's I think that's actually an interesting question, and this sort of touches on, I think, Cem, something that you were sort of touching on, which is this this idea of looking at like meme studies, of actually seeing like, you know, what is this thing, and analyzing it, and which is but I want to open it up to the three of you on yeah, meme studies. What does it mean to sort of like formally analyze or study these things? Is this something that you're interested in?
Sorry, no, I just also want to address what just has been brought up now. I think it's a bit disappointing to be misunderstood this way, because I think this also comes from the like, let's say, American centrism or like English speaking centrism of the internet too, that I think these characters are kind of assumed only in a certain context, which I completely disapprove, and like I don't want to be put in a position that I have to out myself to kind of explain that I don't agree with these things at all, and like I'm not even like, I don't live in these countries, and I'm come from a non-white background, and like this doesn't these politics don't sit right with me either. But it's also, I think, very American centric to assume that these characters only have that meaning in these particularly like two countries, and in a way I do like work with meme scholars and like people who do academic research into memes, and this has never like, this is definitely an open conversation, and in that way I try to do it in a way that also, yeah, produce more content around how memes could be like, how first of all meme making could be a tool people can learn to also analyze memes in a more critical way, and like collaborate with people as much as possible to analyze that.
That's actually a really important point, which is that I think because of the fact that, you know, there's literally billions of people who are online and who are kind of creating, making, sharing images, something that might sort of appear in one place could be radically transformed into, and you know, in another country, another context, another language, means something very different. And sometimes, you know, when you bring something that's from the United States and something from, for example, let's say, I don't know, let's say like Egypt, just as you know, and you put, they both might use similar imagery, but the meaning is completely different.
But I think what I would say is like, I'm saying I wouldn't use that, because I don't want to have to justify anything in the same way that you are now having to, you know, explain why you would make that decision. Like, I think my approach to posting online has always come from a point of like, I want to be clear and I want to be sincere, and I appreciate that there is like a younger generation that deals in post irony that is fine and interesting and worthy of study, but it's just like not where I want to be. I write to people who are too exhausted for irony. Like, I don't have the energy to produce it either. And like, as you say, you know, Pepe the Frog is a terrifying sign if you see it in America or in England, but that was also used in like the Hong Kong protests in 2019 and 2020 for completely different reasons. And like the creator of it supported the use of it for those protests. Like, I think that's fine, but in that duality, I'm not there for it. And I think neither is my audience personally.
It's yeah, I think there is so maybe this is where something like meme studies, or you know, taking a more kind of critical or academic approach to it, where it's sort of like you're able to see the kind of the history, you're looking at certain you know, where things trace, and also what these things could mean in different places, but there's actually a couple of other really kind of interesting and fascinating questions. But for example, there was a question from Simone, who wanted to ask about memes becoming toothless, and asked, what's your opinion on the digital castration of AI-powered tools, such as ChatGPT, in order to make them acceptable for a wider audience? Isn't this trend going to annihilate what ultimately makes memes effective and interesting? Are we witnessing the beginnings of generative art speak 2.0? So it's quite an interesting question. But Any thoughts?
Oh, there's already a website called like, have you guys seen this website? It's called like, oh my God, my Paris, stop. Sorry, my cat's like, he's so crazy. It's called like, shit, what is it? It's called like, create my not artist bio, but create, it's something, what is it called?
It's like the artist statement generator
yeah,
or something.
oh yeah, it's the artist, it's been around for like, I don't know, 15 years. It is amazing. Like all you do, you don't have to do anything. You just push a button and it generates, and it goes along with like my like dislike of art speak. And you guys, I was trained in art speak. Like I went to art school for 7 years and I worked at a blue chip gallery, like, and then I had a gallery. Like I can do it. I can do it. Like I'm trained like a ballerina, but I dance like a farmer. Like I refuse to do it. But I think this like art speakiness, it needs to just go away because it serves no one. It's fake. I read these really great rules recently for like how to be an effective writer. It was actually from like Twitter, and it was like one of the best things was like, if you, the least amount of words possible that you can use is the best sentence that you can write, like to communicate an idea. And art speak is like, sometimes I read things that people like write about their work through like amorphous lenses of blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, do you know what you're talking about? Because nobody else does. And like, I would love a refreshing, like very refreshing artist statement that's just like, I found beautiful flowers and the wind was blowing and I was inspired to sit there and paint. And I came back the next day and I painted again and again and again. And here's the body of work that came from that series. You know what I mean? Like, give me that. But like this fake thing, and what it is it's a product of, in my opinion, capitalism. It's because what it is it's a form of real-time self-mythologizing. It's people trying to create a myth that does not exist. So what are they going to do? They're going to use all of this flowery language to make something sound more magical and more powerful than it actually is. Like we're talking about a 24-year-old painter who like has no life experience, has a God-given talent, but has had no time to develop this talent yet, probably hasn't had very much life experience, but we're gonna create this mythology around this body of work, 3 paintings, 4 paintings, 8 paintings. That's not a body of work, but whatever, we'll call it a body of work, so that we can sell it for a lot of money by like using this disgusting fake language. And then people, because they don't understand it and they feel belittled by it, it's they eat it up with a spoon. And it's actually a great tool to like belittle somebody, make them feel dumb, so that they're like, oh, you know what? I need to have that because I need to feel like I'm smart enough and good enough to really understand that, when really there's not that much to understand. It's pretty simple.
That's no, it's I think, and it's some of this does come through in for example, let's say like the meme practices or online critical practice, but this is, I think you put it so directly. It's difficult to disagree with what you just said, and especially this idea of mythologizing and using kind of art language. But I'm curious about this, the sort of actually, let's maybe move on to sort of the next question, because I think there's a few coming in. So one of them actually, and maybe this sort of goes slightly away from the online spaces, but an anonymous attendee writes, as artists, if you were to stage a physical exhibition in a gallery, how would you translate the form of a meme into a show for a physical space? And I think this is something that we touched on a little bit earlier with the extension of your practices. But I think the three of you have worked on specific things that take this kind of like these ideas from the working in social media or the online world and into the gallery spaces or into institutions and things like this. Maybe if really kind of briefly mention like what you've done, like for example, Hilde, your work with Sotheby's, or Cem with Verses.
Cem, you want to go first? I was just blabbing.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just still a bit thinking about the other one, because it's disappointing to be questioned like this as a person of color, and like it's just, I think, a shallow throw. And like to be drawn into this politics, I think like I don't want to be a part of this. But yeah, when it comes to making exhibitions of memes, this was since I got this invitation to an exhibition a couple of years ago, I really thought about it, and like really I kind of developed some principles around it, that like it should always be, it's not about making representations of memes in physical objects or physical spaces, but creating extensions of them, meaning that it could be like a deconstruction of a meme or an adaptation of it into a different medium. Like in the case of Louisiana Museum, it was like looking at exhibition posters as a meme template and adapting meme ideas into this was one way of doing it, or turning them into Polaroids and then turning those into posters was what I did in Documenta. Or at the Barbican Centre, I did a project where I placed the exhibition texts into the meme phrases from memes into the information screens around the building in a way that recognizes these information screens as like sort of social and digital spaces. So in that way, I kind of refused the idea of making, for example, paintings of memes or prints of them, just so that they turn into like, it's like a tangible object. But instead, I'm interested in, sort of creating extensions of them, which would hopefully give more credit to the digital one over time and kind of create more recognition around that.
And there is something, I think, for example, the one which I really enjoyed reading about, I wish I could have seen it in person, is the one at Versus Art Projects, which dealt with art writing specifically. And there is something about that which did feel almost kind of like the logic or the idea behind like meme, like what you'd see in a meme, but kind of expanded to be sort of something native to the gallery space, specifically on this kind of like and touched on something that Hilde, you spoke about very kind of sharply as well, which is about this thing of art writing. You know, the press release, the curatorial statement, all of these things which do mythologize. So it's there is, and to answer the question, I think, you know, looking, I would urge them to look into, you know, the work that our three guests here have done, because, you know, they've definitely done, you know, taking kind of this what you might see online into physical spaces in institutions, and that's an interesting process. So so we have a let's see, just looking through the questions here. So I think one of the last questions maybe we can ask is, and we touched a bit on this before, which is what happens after memes die? I think this is maybe this is not the there's a few different things we can end up, but I think this was part of the conversation earlier about the kind of the political charge of certain imagery and certain memes, but memes also do have a lifespan. You know, sometimes things come back and things you know, go away, but what happens after memes die? And can we ultimately change the meanings of them? Like, how fluid are these images, and can they mean something else after they've gone away?
Do they die?
Will never die.
Yeah, I don't think they die. I think they just like go past us on the timeline and eventually recirculate and get reposted by other people.
Or they might just become like passe and like I don't know, like, you know, when you watch like a movie from the 70s and people are like, I need a quaalude, and you're like, what's a quaalude? And then you have to like Google that and you're like, ooh, a pill I've never heard of. Like, you know, like one day people might need to might see a meme. I think that, wait, I have this like theory that in the future there's going to be like really incredible sort of almost like telescopes that and the word telescope is wrong, but I don't know a better word for it, that enables us to like micro examine the past of the internet. Like, I feel like we'll be able to like real time go back and like really look at things, which is why I think, because I think that the physical object will continue to become more and more obsolete, which sadly, I mean, even for like paintings, you know, people talk about like, oh, well, you know, art history has a very particular meaning, and like there's only this certain subset of artists that are very important, and then like everyone else is irrelevant. And I'm like, actually, maybe now, but there's really no way to predict because of the way that we'll be able to experience the internet in the future, looking backwards. I think a lot of people are going to be able to like delve into like pockets of the internet in all different kinds of artists and all different kinds of practices in ways that like now it's very like fundamental and basic, and like maybe you can Google them, get a bad JPEG, read a little bit, but I think in the future like we'll really be able to go back and like look. But in terms of like memes dying, like maybe my memes will die, but I'm hoping to go into television. Like that's the direction that I really want to go, because I think that the art world deserves a really good TV show, and not one of these like I'm gonna pit artists against each other to like who can make a better art object. I think that the art world deserves like a great soap opera-esque, like prestige HBO television series a la Succession, but about the art world. And that's kind of the direction that I want to go with all of these memes, because that's basically what they all are like me. And I've written these, you know, I've written scripts, I've written all these things like sort of pushing in this direction, because when memes fall out of fashion, I'm ready to go to TV, because I think that the art world is big enough and mainstream enough now that we've piqued the interest of the rest of the world, and I think the people are ready to like look in and see it.
Yeah,
I would watch that TV show.
I just wanted to just on that, because both Gabrielle and Hilde sort of echoed, you know, this idea that like memes don't die, and I just wanted to pivot it over to Cem. If they don't die, then you know there is this kind of fluid nature to them, this instability, and I think an agency where you can come in and redefine them. So I'm you know, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on how that agency could be exercised. How, you know, how can we actually change the meanings of certain things, and then let's wrap up after that.
Yeah, definitely. I think in that way, it's again, it's very messy, and it's like sort of like a constant compromise and negotiation that you have to make. And I think that way the medium also plays a big factor in, like, for example, now there's this big switch from like image to more like video-based memes and like video-based content, I think that will definitely have an effect. And I think beyond that, like I think images do die over time, or like their meanings, like they get recontextualized, and we're I think always encapsulated in our own perception when we're looking at images. And I think beyond that, yeah, we just have to, I think, have these conversations in good faith and in kind of giving the other side the benefit of the doubt. And I think, yeah, this will just continue.
Of course, I think there's so much to say, and I know that there were points of tension, but I think at the end of the day, this is, you know, we're dealing with images and text, and you know, these bits of content that get spread around so quickly, and sometimes they can come from certain places. They can be used for certain things, for entertainment, for political purposes, you know, for and everything in between. Of course, entertainment is political. Everything is political, but you know, there's the three of you have really fascinating practices that I think have touched, you know, certainly myself. This was a very selfish pleasure of mine to be chatting with you over this the past hour and the past couple of days. But you know, I maybe this is a good place to kind of wrap things up. And but you know, you've been able to start with something where it was sharing kind of content that seemed relatable, that illuminated things, but then expanded into these other platforms that really show the breadth of your own kind of experiences and directions and the possibilities of what we can all do. So I just wanted to thank the three of you, Hilde, Gabrielle, and Cem. Really a pleasure. And I wish we had like another hour. I still have this like list of questions that like is not ending. I'm just scrolling. But no, thanks to the three of you, and it's really been a pleasure. And if you have a quick thing to wrap up with, otherwise we'll end here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful, and it's so nice to meet all of you finally.
Yeah, let me know what happens with the TV show. Yeah, I was just going to say thank you to everyone for listening. It was a long conversation.
Yes, thank you everyone for participating.
Wonderful.
Good luck with everybody at Art Basel, Hong Kong. May you sell everything. May nothing be available.
Place everything. Place it all.
Bye, guys.
Thanks to Art Basel Hong Kong for organizing this, Stephanie and the team. We'll see you in the future.